Okay,
Hello.
I'm gonna find Phyllis, and I think she's gonna start our meeting off, or Kathy. Kathy is going to start our meeting.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, Kathy. Thank you again.
You're welcome. Well, good morning, everyone. We welcome you to our January AAUW General Membership Meeting. Our speaker this morning is our own AAUW member, Alyson Ball, who will speak with us about what's really happening at the southern border. Do you wonder if the U.S. has a humanitarian crisis, a politically charged disaster, or a national emergency at our southern border? Would you like to understand a little bit more about what's currently happening there? If so, then you've definitely come to the right place this morning to learn more about this important topic from Alyson. A little background about Alyson. She holds a BA from Cornell and an MBA from Wharton, and she spent her career in marketing and international business. After retiring, Alyson volunteered as a troubleshooter for an international microfinance organization. I'm not even sure what that means, but it sounds good. Having moved to Charlottesville, Virginia in 2003, she created a company that consulted with and taught best practices to nonprofit boards. Currently, Alyson volunteers with the Charlottesville International Rescue Committee, giving presentations about refugees throughout Central Virginia and actually throughout Southern Arizona. Alyson has studied U.S. immigration for over 4 years and has created multiple presentations to inform the general public of our U.S. immigration laws, history, and procedures. Currently, Alyson is the chair of our A4A, Alliance for Action, Immigration Action Team, which informs others about border and immigration issues and urges government representatives to correct immigrant injustices and support immigration reform. So Alyson, as you can see, has a great background and is well equipped to help us gain a better understanding about what's going on at the southern border. Before I begin the program, or before I turn it over to Alyson, actually, just a couple of housekeeping business issues. We suggest that you put your view, your Zoom view on speaker view. Alyson will be sharing some slides with us, and that might allow you to better see the slides. During the presentation, we encourage you to ask your questions using the chat icon on Zoom. If you are on a laptop, you'll find the chat icon at the bottom of your screen. Once you hover down at the bottom of your screen, kind of in the middle of the toolbar at the bottom. If you're on an iPad, if you go to the upper right-hand corner, you'll see 3 dots. If you click on the 3 dots or tap the 3 dots, you'll see more. If you tap on that, you'll see the chat icon. We'll be monitoring the chat during Alyson's presentation and have a question and answer period after that time. And then the last piece of housekeeping business is I would ask you all to make sure that you're on mute so that we can enjoy Alyson's presentation without interruption. And so I will now turn the program over to Alyson.
Great. Kathy, thank you so much. And I'm so happy to be here with you today. As you know, some of you know that I'm still in Virginia. We decided not to come out this winter to Arizona, and boy, do we miss it. We miss the people, of course, which we are all missing people these days, but we're also missing, of course, the desert in southern Arizona. I'm going to share my screen now and pull up my presentation. I have just 16 slides and about half an hour. So I think we'll be good for time, and then we'll open it up to questions. So thanks, Kathy, for reminding people if they have questions, please just go to the chat and we'll go through those questions first, and then we'll take questions from people at the end. So there'll be plenty of time for questions. What we're going to talk about today is we're going to start with really a reminder of what drives people north, or what drives northern migration. We're going to do some history of the border. We're going to talk about border patrol, detained migrants, deaths at the border, drug cartels. I want to talk to you about asylum, which is a legal process here and what has happened to asylum at the southern border, as well as give you some COVID updates and then give you some resources at the end if you'd like to learn more. So again, just as a reminder, what drives northern migration? Really, there are three main reasons why people come north. The first really is to reunify with their family. These are either people who have lived here or who are coming to live with other people in their family. And we know that 2/3 of the unauthorized, or those people who are living here without papers, have lived here 10 years or longer. And of those, 1/3 have lived here for 20 years or longer. So we have a lot of people who've lived here for a long time without the proper papers. So that's the first reason. The second reason, of course, is poverty. We know that in these countries, especially in the Northern Triangle countries of Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras, we find many people that are not economically secure where they live. And of course, many of these people are subsistence farmers. So this latest storm, for example, Storm Eta, really wiped out many of the subsistence farmers in Honduras and in Guatemala. This is only going to drive more people north based on the climate change that's happening there. And then, of course, we hear about this a lot, the violence. People who come here seeking asylum who are fleeing persecution in their home countries. Now, remember that the root causes of these problems, poverty and violence, are two things really that we can point to. One is that when these countries became independent from Spain, the constitutions that were set up really left the governments as very centralized governments and in the hands of just a few families or people. And what this did was leave a very large population of poor people and just a few people holding all the wealth. Sadly, what I've learned in the last 4 years as I've studied the border and immigration is I've learned that the US has intervened in many of these countries economically, politically, and militarily, and that too has destabilized these countries and caused some of the northern migration. Fortunately, everything I've read that talks about what Joe Biden plans to do, he understands this issue and he understands that we need to work on these root causes in order to prevent people from coming north. So that's real good news. Just a quick overview of the southern border. As you know, right where most of you are sitting today in Green Valley, first it was Native Americans who lived here. Then it became New Spain. We remember the Anza Trail in 1776. Then it became Mexico when they declared their independence from Spain. And then the creation of the southern border as it stands today really happened in the middle of the 1800s, finally ending with the Treaty of Messina and the Gadsden Purchase in 1854. So again, where you are today was part of that Gadsden Purchase, where we have the current border of the southern part of Arizona, where it stands today. Remember that the border across California and Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas cuts across 6 federally recognized tribes' land, including the Tohono O'odham, which are just to the west of where you are. And that throughout history, we've always had concerns about this border being too porous. Early on, we were worried about the fact that the Chinese, who had been prevented from coming here by law, were coming across the border. At one point in our history, we were worried about cattle ticks coming across the border from Mexico into the US. During Prohibition, we were worried about bootlegged goods. And then, of course, in World War II, we worried about the Germans coming in through the southern border. So we've always had a concern about this southern border. I wanted to just let you take a look at it from the perspective of Border Patrol. Each of these that's named here is a sector of the Border Patrol. And you can see that we're in the Tucson sector, and that the Tucson sector includes most of Arizona, except for that far west part, which is part of the Yuma sector. Now you'll notice in the key on the lower left that the dark blue stands for tribal land. So you'll see just to the west of us is the Tohono O'odham Nation. That's the actual nation's land, but in fact, it goes into Mexico as well. Now, some of their sacred and their burial property and lands is outside of that dark blue, and we'll talk about that in a minute when we talk about where is the border being built. But you'll notice just a big difference between Arizona with tribal and federal lands in the blues. Compare that now to Texas. Most of the Texas border is held in private property land. And we know that President Trump is still fighting the battles and court cases to try to make sure that some of that land is available to build the border wall that he wants to build. So how did this all come about? Really, there were two main eras and two main changes. The first there you can see is changes to the border tactics. You see a list of four programs in four different places along the border where people realized, first starting in El Paso and then eventually ending up in the rest of Texas, that if people could just in these cities, if the Border Patrol were to block people coming across the cities, they would basically deter most of the unauthorized people from coming into the country. So that was in the early 90s. And eventually this was converted from a strategy to just put the Border Patrol, the people there to block and prevent people from coming across at the border, to building walls. And in the bottom half of this chart, you see the list of where people started building the wall, starting with George Bush, the father, starting with San Diego, and then continuing on with Clinton and Bush and Obama and Trump. We don't want to think as the problems with building the wall started with President Trump, although he did make that a signature topic of his campaign. It didn't start with him, and it's not just something that the Republicans are doing. This is a bipartisan issue, this border wall. And over time, what politicians have realized is how potent this topic actually is and how significant it is in the minds of some people who don't live near the border, that building the wall could help us keep people out who don't want to come here, who we might not want to have come here. This is a picture, eventually the big tall walls, and we'll show that picture in a minute. Eventually the wall either has to be continuous across the border, or it has to peter out, as you can see here. This is a picture that was taken west of Douglas in Arizona, but west of Douglas. And you can see what that border wall looks like eventually west of Douglas. This is a picture of the new border wall. This is actually a 30-foot wall. It looks an awful lot taller than that in this picture. But this is the new, what they call the bollard wall. And these are thin metal plates that you can see through. And that was, of course, one of the issues that the Border Patrol wanted to be able to see on the other side. But this is what's happening, not just the wall, but if you go down there, people say it's quite devastating, just the destruction in order to build a road that is here on this side of the wall, as well as the wall. But this is what they're putting in right now, is the 30-foot bollard wall is what it's called. I wanted to just show you also, if you haven't been down to Nogales lately, this is the American side of the Nogales border wall right in the middle of town. And this razor wire was hung up by the National Guard folks and extra Army folks that came here just a year ago at Christmas time. There's very little legally that someone from the Army or the National Guard could actually do with regard to immigration based on our laws. And so this was an activity that they thought would be useful for them to achieve. And of course, the mayor in Nogales is fighting this and wants this taken down. I wanted to just mention the deaths in the desert. This is a map, and you can see down at the very bottom, you can see where Arivaca is, so that can orient you. And Green Valley would be on the far right of this map. What this is a map that's used in Mexico to try to deter the people who are coming from from the south, trying to deter them from going north. And what this is showing is 1 day's walk, 2 días caminando, 2 days walk, 3 days walk. How far is it to go through the desert? Each of the red dots represents a death in the desert, and the blue flags are showing tanks of water that are put out by the Humane Borders, and the blue stars are the lights, or there are posts that if you're lost in the desert, if you're near one of these posts, you can call the Border Patrol to come pick you up. So these are maps that really are trying to deter people from going north, but generally by the time you are at that point, and I've spoken to people in shelters on the Mexican side, they're not really in any position to be deterred. They're quite determined. How can I get across that border if they've come that far? I think since the year 2000, across the whole border, something like 20,000 people have died in the desert. And as you know, the Colibri Center tries to match up some of these human remains with the families, because oftentimes it's not apparent who the person is, or they might not have an ID, but their remains are found in the desert. Pima County is very active in working with the Colibri Center to try to find the families of the folks who die in our desert. This chart really just shows, along with the buildup of the border and of the wall within the border in certain areas, you can see during the same era, the buildup of the Border Patrol over time. Now, Border Patrol is a police agency that works between the ports of entry. So if you were to go down to Nogales, say to the dentist, or to go shopping, or to go eat, you would go through the port of entry and you would talk to the people in the blue. These are the people in the green, and you've probably seen cars driving around from Border Patrol, but you can see the buildup. This is the entire country's Border Patrol, but most of this is at the southern border rather than the northern border, or we have some in both oceans. We have people from the Border Patrol working those territories as well. So there are currently about 20 to 21,000 people who work in the Border Patrol at the southern border. This chart just shows how many migrants are detained at the US-Mexican border, how many people are coming across. You can see that the height was really in the year 2000, that the numbers kind of slowly and steadily went down every year, the number that were apprehended. And then in 2019, that was a figure that you see on the chart through August, but that number actually was about 1 million folks who were detained at the border. And in 2000, it dropped back to about 500,000 because of COVID and for other reasons. There weren't as many people coming across the border throughout the year 2020. I didn't want to leave out the topic of cartels here, and I wanted to be sure that you understood the point. When we talk about drug smuggling from Mexico through to the US, basically everybody agrees that the drug smuggling comes through the US ports of entry. This is where we have inspectors, we have dogs, we have x-rays, we have all kinds of technology, and still the drugs get through. We know that coming across through the ports of entry are lots of trucks right here. Vegetables and manufactured goods come across the Nogales border. And unfortunately, this is where we find that most drugs are smuggled. There is also human smuggling, as you maybe have heard the term coyotes. And we also know that on the Mexican border, the northern part of that Mexican border, the cartels really control the border. So if you were sitting, let's say, in Agua Prietas, across from Douglas, you would know that if you were trying to come north, you would not be able to cross the border unless you had paid the cartel something, either some payment in order to get across the border, that might be $500, or some more money like 2,000 to have someone from the cartel take you across the border. So this is very big money, and it's because of how things have unfolded here at the border. So what we see are there's a lot of preying on the migrants who are in northern Mexico, and I just wanted to list there who is really on this on at the border, who's there waiting. First of all, we have migrants who are coming north for the first time. We have deported Mexicans who've just been sent back to Mexico and they're waiting in shelters, either to go home to their homes in Mexico or try again to come north. And we have asylum seekers who are coming up from Central America. And I'll talk in a minute about how the asylum system has changed recently and affecting people at the border there. In fact, here we are. Recent US actions to reduce asylum. Now remember, asylum says if I can come into the US and present myself and present my case and show that I've been persecuted based on race or religion or political group or persuasion, then I stand a chance to stand in front of the court of an immigration judge and tell my case and seek asylum. So what have we seen and how have we seen over the Trump administration? How have we seen asylum reduced? First of all, we know, in fact, starting with Obama, that money was given from our government to Mexico to strengthen the border down there between Mexico and Guatemala. We've also given them money to strengthen the police down there, because one theory is if we can stop people coming north at the Guatemala-Mexico border, they'll never reach our border. So that's one strategy that the US employs to reduce asylum. We also, number two there, prevent asylum requests at the US border. Metering says we only let so many people in a day to present themselves for asylum, has been happening for years. Secondly, we have signed safe third country agreements. So we might have someone from Honduras present themselves at our southern border. We send them to Guatemala. Doesn't really work out very well for them there. These are new agreements that were signed within the Trump administration. Right now, we have about 26,000 people waiting to ask for asylum in this manner at the southern border, right across the border. Inhumane treatment as deterrence. Everyone that works with the migrants knows about La Hilera, which is the ice box, which is where these people are held in detention related to the Border Patrol. And then, of course, there's detention. Many people are brought from the Border Patrol detention right into someplace like Eloy or Florence with the ICE detention, even also a very difficult place where there's not very good medical, especially during COVID now, demeaning language, etc. And then we have some changes to the actual asylum process. We have the zero tolerance policy that was implemented by Jeff Sessions, where he said no one that's been affected by gang violence will be able to use that for their asylum cases. There's MPP, which is the Migrant Protection Policy, or the Remain in Mexico policy. Normally, an asylum seeker who presents themselves and passes their credible fear test would be allowed to live in the United States. I actually am working with people here in Charlottesville who are in this situation. They've presented themselves, in fact, at the Tijuana border. They have passed the credible fear interview. This is a young woman and her son. They have been allowed to come and live with their financial sponsor, who is her sister, here in Charlottesville, and they're waiting for their day in court to be able to present. Well, no longer. now these asylum seekers who present at the southern border are asked to wait in Mexico until their court cases in the US. And also another change to the asylum process is that the credible fear interviews, generally done by an asylum officer, a well-trained asylum person, to hear these stories and to understand what's true and what's proper, are now being done by the Customs and Border Protection people. So while they're sitting in the Border Patrol detention center, they're asked to plead their cases to the very people that are incarcerating them. And it doesn't really work out very well for a lot of these people currently. Also at COVID, of course, we've seen updates at the border. We've paused all refugee applications, all asylum seekers at the ports of entry as of March. We're doing what's called rapid expulsion. So people who cross our borders are being put right back over into Mexico, and that includes adults as well as unaccompanied minors. These are very young children. Some used to be returned to Sassabee where there are no services, but I think that the Mexican government asked the US government, please do not deport people here. So now they're going across in Douglas, and that's where we're seeing the buildup. Remain in Mexico was approved. It was, most of these issues that are problematic are being discussed in the courts quite a bit, but Remain in Mexico had been approved in the courts. Some people we know waiting in Nogales with this Remain in Mexico policy must go to El Paso for their immigration court dates. And because during COVID, the courts were closed, they might have taken the bus from Nogales all the way over to El Paso, taking 8 hours, spent the night, went to the court only to find out the court was closed, but they have a new court date, which is several months away. So the courts are just opening up now, but it's been very problematic for these folks who are waiting for their court hearings, especially for those in the last few years who've been asked to wait in Mexico. And there's big buildups in all these border towns of people waiting for their court date in the US. This was a statistic from about 2 or 3 months ago. I'm not sure that it's current, but at that time, there were almost 4,000 employees that tested positive for COVID, 14 had died. And again, this is a several-month-old statistic. I haven't seen any reports lately, but we knew at that time that COVID positive people had been deported to at least 11 countries. Very early on in the COVID pandemic, we saw the US deporting people that were COVID positive. So this is my last slide. I just put my email address at the top there in case you have any questions after this. And here are some other resources that you might be interested in. Some of you may have seen the new Netflix series called Immigration Nation, which is very interesting and I highly recommend it. I think they go over some very interesting topics that are important for us to understand. Somebody was embedded with ICE for I think 2 or 3 years to make this series. And of course, it was not favorably received by the ICE or the government, but they were able to go ahead with it. There are some other, there's another video, Deserted, which is also very interesting about people living here unauthorized. There are some articles that if you're interested really in knowing more about the border in 7 charts that the BBC put together. And the National Immigration Forum is a national organization that we get newsletters from quite a bit, talks about border security along the southwest border and how that goes. Todd Miller, who's a local author out there in Arizona, has written a new book, which I read last winter when I was out there. And it was probably one of the most disturbing books I ever read, not only talking about what's going on at our border, but how the US has been working with other countries to ensure that their borders are safe as well, and how this whole thing could unfold. one of my favorite videos I like to emphasize is this Harvest of Empire. And what this does is it gave me, and I think others who've seen it, just a better understanding of how the US was involved in some of these other countries as well as Puerto Rico. What have we done? What caused us to be involved with these countries? What was the time frame? What was the rationale that we used for entering these countries either militarily or politically, and how that has affected the countries going forward. And then another one that I would highly recommend is a YouTube that's called The High Cost of Deporting Parents. It's only about 25 minutes, but it talks about a family here in the US. The father is Guatemalan, he's not documented. The mother is an American citizen, and they have several children, one of whom is special needs. So the mother is home full time. The father had developed a construction business of, I think they're in California, but I think he employed something like 10 people in his construction business. Well, one day he was picked up and he was deported. And at the time of the video, he was living in Guatemala, wanting to come back. Now, in the meantime, of course, he's left his American wife and his American children, and they are in dire straits economically because their main bread earner is no longer with us. So this is an important aspect of immigration that I like to emphasize, because this is happening throughout the country in all of our communities. And then I just wanted to mention, if any of you is interested in becoming just a little bit more active in immigration, the Alliance for Action Immigration Action Team, if you get on our mailing list, then you can receive our calls to action. And that's really just twice a month. We put out a call to action. Please contact your senators or your congressperson or both about this issue related to immigration. And so if you're interested, we'd love to have you join our mailing list, and you just have to send an email to Gail Frank, and her email happens to be gailbarbara@mac.com. So I think we have about 10 or 15 more minutes. I'm going to leave that up just for a minute, but I'm wondering if we had questions, Kathy.
Well, let me say a couple of things. First, I think we're going to try to capture this slide with the resources and print it in the Valley View, the February Valley View, our newsletter. So we'll have, if you weren't able to get everything down, we'll have that for you at that time. And yeah.
Oh, there you are. Good, okay.
We have some time. I'd encourage you to use your Zoom hand. And you'll find your Zoom hand either under reactions at the bottom of your screen, or I think up at the other top. Yes, like Claudette has found hers. You'll find it there and I'll call on you, or you may find it in your participant list, depending on what version of Zoom you have. So Claudette, go ahead.
I wanted to know how we access the Harvest of Empire video. Is it also on YouTube, or is there some other way we access it?
I think it is, Claudette. I think you can go to YouTube, and if you wrote Harvest of Empire, it would show up there. Yes.
We'll try. Thank you.
Right. It's free. It is free, and it's very, very interesting.
Miriam Burt, please ask your question.
Hi, I was wondering, and I don't know if this is outside of, what you're prepared to talk about, Alyson, but first of all, thank you very much for a very clear, clean, well-presented, interesting full of facts and presentation. I'm glad you're going to put it in the newsletter. I was wondering if Biden has said yet of any specific plans to perhaps pedal back some of these more onerous punitive measures that have been going on under his administration. And, if there was any buzz about that going on specifically, or if that's too early.
No, there is buzz going on. This is a great question, so thanks for that. And we, of course, would love to know what Biden's going to do. We can't be sure, but we're getting some very positive signals that he not only wants to roll back the tough things that Trump has implemented in his time, but he wants to go beyond that. We're hearing that he wants to provide, for example, a pathway to citizenship for the 11 million unauthorized or undocumented folks. I mean, we have materials at A4A that talk about what we want to do to push Biden and what we hope he's doing. But he understands the complexities here that have evolved. And I think he also understands the seriousness of what has happened. The other day I read, the thing we worry about, of course, is will Biden get bogged down in COVID or the economy or healthcare? And I just read the other day that he's got 4 priorities, and the fourth of the priorities, the fourth of the list is racial justice. And I think he tucks this immigration issue in the racial justice category. And if we can only keep his focus on this, we'll be in pretty good shape. What I'm saying is, we think his intention is right as far as I said, rolling back what has happened. We think some of this, of course, has to go through Congress, and that's where we're going to see some slowdown, I'm afraid, to improve things. But it's just never gotten through the system. This morning, I was reading, we all get this from the National Immigration Forum, Al Noorani's notes. Every day he comes out with the latest news. This morning was a petition signed by all kinds of organizations, over 100 organizations, wanting to push for massive immigration reform. It's the only way to really straighten some of these issues out, which is what's our legal immigration system look like? And we know mostly we take family reunification immigrants. Then we take just a few work-related visas that are going to be new citizens, and just a few humanitarian, not very many. We know those are the only 3 major categories for coming here, but the laws that we live with are from 1965, and they're very rigid, and we're not able to swing those numbers around based on the current needs of the time. So most people are in agreement that we don't want the system that we have. And as it turns out, surveys show most Americans are favorably disposed to allowing those 11 million citizens or 11 million undocumented to become citizens. And so we've got sort of the mojo going, we hope. What we need is more people pushing from the populace to the government. We need more people saying, yep, I'm on board with these changes, let's go. And that's really what the Alliance for Action is going to work on this year, is positively influencing the changes so that if Biden comes out with a statement, then it's mimicked by the general public telling their senators and their congressmen to vote in this way. I have a personal goal for myself to send an email every week to my senators and my congressmen. My 2 senators are Democrats, and they're very much in favor of these changes. My congressperson is a Trumpite who just was elected. He's not going to help us at all, but I'm going to tell him anyway, because I want to become that tick mark in his office by his staffer that we've got somebody that's pro-immigrant out there, and I need other people to tell him the same thing, so he doesn't think that it's just the people making noise. So we're cautiously optimistic, and we need people to help us push the system. So thanks for that question.
Thanks. Linda Laird, did you have a question?
I
ahead.
recently read that the Border Patrol has a huge program to work with Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts to co-opt them, in effect, and make them want to be Border Patrol. They teach them weaponry, they teach them all kinds of ways of catching people, things that we wouldn't normally teach children. How do you fight that?
You write to your congressman and say, well, I don't think this is a good idea. Or you write to, well, Kirkpatrick, it would be an agreement with you, I think, on that. But you just tell them anyway. I think we have to be sure to tell people what we think. I don't know much about this program. I have heard about it, but this is part of the weaponization of the border, the militarization of the border that we know has happened over time. 2 years ago, I took a course at the Border Patrol that was called the Border Patrol Ambassadors or something like that. And I just took it because I wanted to see what they were telling people about their organization and how they operated. I was totally appalled by what they were saying and what they were talking about. Of course, they had very positive stories. I know that there was in Green Valley last winter, or was it the winter before? Maybe some of you attended that. There was a Border Patrol session that they had probably 150 or 200 people attending. And the communication that they had was all very positive about what they were doing, how they were doing it, how well they treated people. It wasn't what we know to be the truth, but most of the people in the room were in favor of the Border Patrol and weren't in a position to have any detailed information about their activities other than what they were being told in the meetings. But you can imagine it was quite skewed. So, you know, I say, speak up, write letters to your editor, say this isn't right. We need more people who are against these practices to speak up. Sadly, most of the people who are on the liberal side of things are not thinking that immigration is a high enough priority to work on, whereas many of the folks who are more conservative have the time and energy to speak up against these immigrants. So we just need more people to speak up in favor of the immigrants who are here and the fact that they want more here for our country. So thanks for that question.
Miriam Burt, please ask your question.
Thank you. Thanks for calling on me again.
That's
I
okay.
know that this is your focus, Alyson, is the border, and that's so important to us down here. But information, you know, can be very helpful to have as ammunition for us more liberal people. And isn't it true that many more of the undocumented are not poor Mexicans coming across the border in our country, but there are people who have overstayed student visas, people from other countries?
Yes, absolutely. It's a very good point. I think something like 42% of all unauthorized are visa overstayers rather than border crossers. And we know that every year we have more people who overstay their visas than we do people who cross the border. So that amount is only going to get more pronounced with time. You're exactly right. If you go to the Alliance for Action website and you go to the Immigration Action Group, you will see some resources that might be interesting to you, Miriam. I not only talk about the border, but I have one other presentation that's been posted there, just general basics about immigration, which I gave to this group, I think, last year.
Mhm.
And I have a new presentation, which will be posted there probably in another week, that says what's going on right now. So my focus is not just the border, but my focus is US immigration nationwide and how the laws and the procedures have been affected by the Trump administration and what we need to do about it. So thanks for that.
Alyson, I think this will be the last question, but in terms of the urgency to become involved, can you speak just a little bit about what the conditions are for people who are trying to reach this country, who have been sent back to Mexico or are in Mexico under the Remain in Mexico and are crowded into the border towns?
We know that in Nogales, there are something like 3,000 people right now who have been told to remain in Mexico while they have been given permission to come to the courts and have the hearings. This is a process that takes time. You just don't go into the court once. There are procedures and there's a master calendar hearing, and then you go back. And if you can get a lawyer, you're not required, of course, in these courts to have a lawyer. But most of these people have come north. Right now, we know there are people there from the Golden Triangle, which is Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador. But we also know there are people in Nogales waiting who are from Venezuela. We know there are Cubans. In fact, this afternoon, I think at 3 o'clock, there's a group called Save Asylum, and they're going to have a demonstration online from Nogales that you can key into and you can pull up on your computer and watch. These are people who are living down there who are waiting for the US to open their borders now. But a lot of them have no money. So there are shelters down there. There's the Kino shelter that gives food. They have a new shelter, but no one is living in that shelter now because of COVID. But there are other shelters where these folks live. They go to the Kino shelter to get food, but it's a pretty desperate situation that these people are in because they have, generally speaking, no money. And so they're living really at the, out of the goodness of people's hearts in these shelters. There's the famous place that you see in the news is over in Brownsville, Texas. There's actually a tent city. So it's just like a refugee camp, although they don't have the protection of a general. Generally, if you were in a refugee camp, the UN would be in there and they'd be taking care of folks and distributing food, etc. But in this case, we don't have the UN involved because it's not an official refugee camp. For a while, the Mexican government was not involved. The US government was not involved, but there were all kinds of nonprofits who were in there trying to bring food and medical support to them. Who's the guy who did the work with the food? Jose, forget his name. Anyway, he's down there making sandwiches every day, trying to get food to these people because they're literally living out in the open and waiting for the time when they can come. Now you can imagine the situation. Where do I send my mail if somebody's living in a tent city from the courts? You know, there's lots of confusion over court dates and when am I supposed to appear and how do I do that? And if I go and the court is closed, how do I get a new date? And how much money did I spend to get to the court? This is very, very problematic. And of course, we are under great criticism by the rest of the world. This is not in keeping with our own US laws. It's not in keeping with the UN treaties that we have signed as a nation. So we're breaking all kinds of national and international rules with these activities, not the least is this policy, this Remain in Mexico. So we're creating lots of trouble, and it's not, in my mind, it's not in keeping with who we are as a nation. Thank you.
Alyson, thank you so very much for joining us today. We always learn so much from you. I admire your commitment and your dedication to this cause and your continuing efforts to help us all understand what's going on. So we really appreciate you being with us today. Thank you very much.
Thanks for
I
having
hope
me.
you can hear the virtual applause.
Thank you very much. And
thank
thanks
you.
for everybody for being here. I've enjoyed chatting with you all.
Great. And with that, I'd like to turn the program over to our co-president, Phyllis, who will conduct the business meeting. Thank you again, Alyson.
Thanks.
I want to add my thanks too to Alyson. The history of it is fascinating. I think if we take a message from it, it's speak up, whether it's to your representatives, your political representatives, to other people, become informed, but speak up. So on to the business part of our meeting. First of all, I have an announcement from the Public Policy Committee from Karen Lewick. I'm going to read what she said so I don't miss anything. Senator Andrea D'Alessandro has agreed to speak at the next public policy meeting. We could talk to her about immigration. Andrea is a member of AAUW Green Valley and represents District 2 in the state legislature. She will shed some light on current and upcoming legislation. Because of her busy schedule, our meeting time has changed. We will be meeting on Thursday, January 28th at 2 o'clock rather than 1 o'clock. Anyone who'd like to join us and isn't currently on the public policy contact list is welcome. Just contact Karen Lewick at karenlewick@gmail.com. Karen is also in the roster. So be in touch. It sounds like a very interesting presentation. Second, I want to give a big shout out and thank you to Marilyn Kern. If you went down La Cañada yesterday, you would have seen flags from Esperanza all the way to Continental. Marilyn Kern has organized this for several years. The flags go up on Martin Luther King Day to commemorate what he has given to this country. There are two crews, one group that sets them up in the morning and another group that takes them down. It only takes about an hour. But thank you, Marilyn, for doing this. It's just very, very meaningful. There were a couple of people that I was with that said they love doing this. They do it every year. They look forward to it. It's a good way to get involved in what we're doing. Also, I noticed earlier that Lorna Kitchak was on with us. It's so good to see her. She's been at the morning book group and the out to lunch bunch meetings. It is just really nice to see her face. She looks wonderful. On January 11th, the board took an electronic vote because we needed some input very, very quickly. Our vote was on whether to support the rally to end violence against women and girls. I want to let you know that that vote was 100% for AAUW to support that rally. I want to turn this over now to Libby Byrer, who has organized this rally for several years, and she will tell you a little bit more about it. Libby.
Okay, good morning, everyone. And I'm thrilled that we are going to go ahead and have our annual rally to end violence against women and girls, also known as 1 Billion and Rising. This had become an international event quite a few years ago, and I personally have lost track of how many years AAUW in Green Valley has been participating and sponsoring this event. It will be on Valentine's Day. That is tradition whenever we can land it on Valentine's Day. It's preferably because of where we do our rally a weekend. And it will be Sunday, February 14th, 10 to 11, the intersection of Esperanza and La Cañada. Wear masks, social distance. If you can, we always try to dress in red or purple. Bring appropriate signs. This has nothing to do with anybody in the outgoing administration. This is, again, about ending violence against women and girls. So if you can make a sign, that makes us have more of a statement in our presence, and I'd appreciate it. And if you have any questions, you can always call me. I'm in the directory. And Claudette, you've participated in the past many times. So many of you have. And I'm looking for a good turnout and to show that we continue to care and we continue to be able to exercise our right to stand on county sidewalks, not blocking a pedestrian's way. We stay out of the streets. We don't sit on the wall in front of the mortgage company. And we just remind folks that this is an issue that still needs to be addressed. I think I've got everything. I think that's it.
And
I'll
I
have something
think
in the
that
Valley
really-
View as well.
I think
Can
that.
can I have a quick show of hands who might think they might show up? Anybody? Anybody? We really need you. Thank you. I see B. Thank you. She's muted, but thank you. She's still muted, B. You're muted. You're talking, but you're muted. B.
Well, thank you, Libby. This
You're
is an
welcome.
important thing, and it also supports the mission that AAUW has.
Absolutely.
So we'll see you on February 14th.
Yep.
I also wanted to let you know that something that Libby has been working on, the nominating committee has filled out its slate for next year, but they still need a vice president for program elect. I think this would be a great way for anybody to get involved as vice president for programs elect. You aren't running it. You're part of the committee. You figure out how it all works. And then the following year, you are vice president for programs. I've been on this committee for 2 years. It's really, really interesting to see the ideas that people have for programs, and programs are probably one of the most important part of our organization. Programs like what Alyson presented today, we learn so much from, we expand our knowledge, and I just think it's a really important position. The first year I served on the committee, we had everything organized in about 3 meetings. And from then on, it was very easy going forward. We had the year laid out by June. This year, it's been a little more problematic because of COVID and doing meetings on Zoom, but we've come through and it's worked out really well. Many of you, on another issue, many of you were attending the International Women's Day celebration last March. We had a wonderful luncheon and we had several speakers, one of whom was a homeless woman. Her name was Stephanie Brown, and obviously she wasn't homeless, but she came dressed as a homeless woman in several layers of clothing. In her presentation, she talked to us about what it was like to be homeless, what challenges that it presented as she shed her layers and layers of clothes. Sadly, we have to let you know that she died on December 24th, Christmas Eve, from COVID. She's going to be missed by many people in the community. Now I'm going to turn this over to Susan Kirk to tell us about LunaFest, which is coming up in February.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize I was going to be filling the whole screen. Hello, everyone. Good to see you all. Well, if you look behind me, obviously you know what I'm going to talk about. Our fundraising plans are well underway. And of course, our LunaFest this year is going to be different. The films will still be great, but we will see them virtually. Let's see, 1 month from today, February 20th, or from tomorrow, actually, you will be able to watch the LunaFest films at home and at any time of the day that's convenient for you. You can watch them at 6 o'clock in the morning or 11 o'clock at night or anywhere in between. And here's how it will be done. I'll briefly explain it, and you'll get a lot more details in future blasts, the newsletter and the website. So very soon, Luna will provide us with a link to something called Eventive. They used to use Eventbrite. They've changed it to now Eventive, where for $10, you'll be able to purchase a ticket, a virtual ticket. Your ticket will actually be an email link to watch the films. The second part of our fundraising effort, of course, is the raffle. It was perplexing. How are we going to do a raffle when we can't be together? So what we've done is several members have donated items, some fabulous items. People have taken pictures of their items. Libby wrote creative, as you might guess, descriptions of each of the items. And all of that, the pictures and the descriptions will be on our website up soon. Right now, we're not exactly sure when, but keep watching. It will be soon. We'll also let you know through a blast when they'll be available. So how will you do a raffle when you can't be there? Well, you'll purchase virtual raffle tickets by sending a check to our AAUW post office box address. And you'll be given a form to fill out to choose which items you wish to win. Not quite the same as our usual rowdy party atmosphere at CPAC, but it's the way it goes. And then on Saturday, February 20th at 1 o'clock Arizona time, you'll be able to watch the raffle drawing on a Zoom, and a link will be sent out in a blast. Sound complicated? Well, I don't think so. I think it'll work out just fine. So I would like to also thank everyone who's worked hard on this. It's absolutely amazing, the work that people have done to get this all organized from the very beginning. And hopefully it'll all come together and you'll hear about it very soon. Thank you. Toodaloo.
Thank you, Susan. I've been the lucky person that has been collecting pictures and descriptions of things that are up for raffle. And I have to tell you, it is going to be fabulous. There are some really great items. There's a question up here about what time the raffle is. It's going to be 1 o'clock in the afternoon, Arizona time on the 20th.
Phyllis, can I mention one more thing quickly?
Yeah.
Okay, I wanted to mention that if you don't want to go to the raffle, but you'd like to donate some money to the scholarship fund, you can easily do that by sending a check and noting that it's for scholarships. In the past, we did this half moon, full moon, and so forth. We're not going with those designations this time, but feel free to send a check for whatever you'd like to. And even if you do go to the raffle, you can also send a check.
Susan, before you go, Claudette has her hand up with a question.
Okay.
Oh, it would, no, this is coming in late. It's about the passing of Stephanie Brown. I've been talking to Dan Shear and I've been trying to get a hold of her granddaughter and such because there was no obituary. And I may end up, at Dan's request, I may end up writing something, a recognition for the paper or something, because she was so active in so many places. So here's what I want. If any of you knew Stephanie, were part of her many, many activities, would you drop me a note? My email and everything is in the roster. And I'll just look for those. Okay?
Thanks, Claudette.
You
Much
bet.
appreciated.
Phyllis, excuse me, before we leave, you have another question about, before Susan leaves, are we still taking items to be raffled?
No, we're done. I
Okay.
think, right, Phyllis, we have enough right now. It would be complicated to add any more at this point, I think.
We have 33 items that have been donated. So, and keep in mind that the raffle is the way that we make money for scholarships for women. So this is going to be a very important thing. We've always really prided ourselves on the scholarships. We were able to give 5 scholarships last year. Probably not going to happen this year, but again, this is our way of supporting young women and their education.
But we're no longer taking items to be raffled. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes, we have enough, and they're trying to get it all put together to go on the website. So that'll be up just as soon as possible.
Okay, and then a couple other questions. Alice, was your question answered about the time of the raffle?
My question was, are there still more items to be donated? So my question's been answered.
Okay, great. And then I think Libby had her hand up.
Yes, just a couple of teasers. One of the raffle items is something I know I will purchase tickets for, and that is an Amazon Alexa 4th generation Echo Dot. I think it's a Dot. It's a round one this time. I think I have a collection of Echoes in my house. I like having the music in every room. So that's one item. And another teaser, we have quite a few, but there's some jewelry, of course. But I'm not a great cook, but I do like to cook a little bit. And someone has donated a collection of some kitchen tools that will make prep of your meals much easier. So I'm going to be putting my tickets in that basket too. Just want you to know.
I'm putting
done.
mine in the honey baked ham. There are 2 gift cards for honey baked ham, perfect for Easter.
True.
And thank you to everybody for your donations. They are really great donations. I have one more item that is that I need to inform you that you, on January 15th, you should have received an email that had the AAUW Arizona newsletter in it. And along with that was a note from Julie Brown. And this is to announce that the National AAUW has a proposal in front of it. That proposal is to eliminate the degree requirement for AAUW membership. People have very strong feelings either for or against this, but they are trying to gather opinions and thoughts from members between now and February 5th. They're just seeking input. If you go back to your January 15th blast that you got, there is an article in there. There will also be an article in the Valley View newsletter about this that will be coming out around February 1st. Late notice here, there is an online interactive town hall this afternoon at 2 o'clock Arizona time. If you want, where they're going to discuss that issue. If you want to be part of that, if you go to the National AAUW website, they will get you on, but you do have to go there to let them know that you want to be let into that. Our next meeting will be February 16th, and it sounds like a very interesting program. Marvel Barnard is a member of the Ladies Professional Golf Association, and her presentation is on the timeless wisdom of the founders of the LPGA. I think this is very timely as we talk about equity for women, so I think it should be a very interesting program. We hope to see you on February 16th. Again, thank you to our tech host today, Henny Queeser. These programs come together only because our tech hosts practice and write notes and are just so well organized for it. So thank you, Henny, our tech host for this month. We'll see you all in February.